Good evening and welcome. Let's start with the top story that we are tracking for you. On the 23rd of March, Israel will hold its fourth election in 2 years. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hopes a world-leading vaccine rollout will finally help him establish a stable majority. The main contenders for Israel's 23rd of March elections are Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the blue and white centrist alliance leader Benny Gantz, Yesh Atid leader Yair Lapid, and Labour Party leader Merav Michali, as well as Yamina Party leader Naftali Bennett and the Likud defector Gideon Saar, who broke with Netanyahu to form his own New Hope party. But as the crucial polls inch closer, thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets to protest against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's policies and leadership. While Netanyahu is counting on his highly successful vaccination campaign to propel him to victory, local reports suggest that over 20,000 protesters gathered at the Paris Square, close to Netanyahu's official residence. The protesters waved flags and carried posters shouting, "Bibi, go home."
We are here to protest against Netanyahu and his corrupted government. This is our last chance before the election.
I came to speak and protest about the situation when the government is probably going to win this election, and somebody needs to stop this, because the government will be worse than it used to be, and the people must vote differently.
I'm here to overthrow Benjamin Netanyahu. We have been here since the summer, expecting it to be better in Israel.
The protesters are demanding Netanyahu's resignation over the alleged corruption scandals and mishandling of the pandemic. Netanyahu has been in power for the last 12 years, and the leader hopes to retain his seat in the vote on Tuesday. Now remember, Benjamin Netanyahu is the first Israeli prime minister to be indicted in office for corruption and bribery. However, Netanyahu has denied any wrongdoing. The series of elections have been ongoing since April of 2019, but the winning parties failed to form the government. Experts say that Netanyahu's Likud party is likely to emerge as the biggest player. But polls predict that Israel's election is heading toward a deadlock. Although Netanyahu's right-wing Likud party is leading in the polls, it will need coalition partners to secure a 61-seat majority in the 120-seat Knesset. And that means that Israel is looking at three possible outcomes: another coalition under Netanyahu, an ideologically divided government united only by its opposition to him, or looming fifth election for the West Asian nation. For more on this, we're being joined by Dr. Toby Green, who is a lecturer in the Department of Political Studies in Bar-Ilan University. He is joining us from Israel. Thank you for being with us on this broadcast. Now, Netanyahu is counting on his highly successful vaccination campaign to propel him to victory. However, there are people out on the streets protesting against his policies. How do you assess the situation?
Well, it is indeed very polarized, as your report mentioned. This is the fourth in a series of 4 elections. There is a strong grassroots movement and popular movement that is tired of Netanyahu and his rule. That's influenced, of course, by the fact that he's on trial, and the evidence sessions in his court case will begin shortly after the election. But the fact is, views about Netanyahu are deeply entrenched and have been throughout this whole series of unusual repeat elections, and there is a very fine balance between those that support Netanyahu and his continued rule and those that wish to see a change in leadership. The election will be very, very close, and there are many factors that make it extremely difficult to predict which of the outcomes that your report mentioned, a Netanyahu government, a anti-Netanyahu government, or a repeat election, which of those will be the outcome, and we may not know, in fact, for several weeks.
Right. And Dr. Green, what do you think of the main contenders? Who do you think is Prime Minister Netanyahu's biggest competition in these polls?
Well, it's a complex story. The polls are very clear, in fact. Netanyahu is predicted to be the largest party again. The second largest party is very, very clear. It's the party of Yair Lapid. He would, in normal circumstances, be the most obvious candidate to lead a anti-Netanyahu coalition. The situation, however, is complicated by the fact that other anti-Netanyahu parties are not well ideologically aligned with Lapid. Lapid is very much a centrist politician, but his anti-Netanyahu coalition, worried to have the chance to form one, would have to include some right-wing parties and some left-wing parties that don't sit comfortably together. Some of the leaders of those right-wing parties have said they would form a coalition with Lapid, but they would not allow him to lead it because he's too left-wing. So you can see some of the deep complexities. It's like a Rubik's Cube trying to solve this coalition puzzle, which is why we're having a fourth election in just 2 years.
Right. In fact, then, as you have mentioned, the polls predict that Israel's election are heading towards a deadlock. What can you tell us about that, and what will happen then? Will it be another election?
Well, we wait to see. It may be that Netanyahu is able to secure a 61-seat majority and form a government. And it may be that there is an anti-Netanyahu coalition that can be formed. If Netanyahu is two or three seats short of a majority coalition, even in the best case scenario, then we should not rule out that the anti-Netanyahu parties, as difficult as they may find it to agree on various ideological issues, will find a way to form at least a short-lived government. That's primary purpose would be to remove Netanyahu from power, to stabilize the country in the context of a COVID-caused economic crisis, and to prepare for a future election. That's also a possibility. But if Netanyahu can't form a coalition, and if the anti-Netanyahu forces also can't form a coalition, then the law simply locks us into a kind of reboot cycle. It's like Control-Alt-Delete. We have to go through the process all over again. But I stress that all three possibilities are still very much on the table. So we shouldn't. We should keep our minds very much open.
Right. As you said, we'll wait and see. Thank you very much for being with us and for that analysis. WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.